Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Brief. Trump moved, having the U.S. Department of Transportation issue an official document withdrawing $4 billion in federal funding for California's high-speed rail project, citing its lack of prospects. This incident sparked discussion and evolved into another contentious issue between the two major U.S. political parties. The event also drew attention from Chinese public opinion circles. The failure of high-speed rail in the U.S. starkly contrasts China's high-speed rail success. It's been 17 years since California approved America's first true high-speed rail in 2008, yet not a single track has been laid on the 171-mile project. Trump administration and California government have been locked in a dispute over $7 billion spent on California high-speed rail project. How did California's governor respond to Trump's cut funding? He played the China card. He claimed Trump was essentially handing the future to China and insisted California would not let him. He announced a lawsuit had been filed against the Trump administration. While both sides were locked in a fierce battle, on July 18, industry representatives from China and the U.S. gathered at the China International Supply Chain Expo. At the China-U.S. Railway Industry Roundtable, they discussed cooperation in the railway sector. According to foreign exchange reports, Huang Yong'an, the commercial counselor at the U.S. Embassy in China, said at the meeting that both the U.S. and China have their own strengths in the railway industry and he looks forward to cooperation. This American diplomat, Huang Yong'an, stated that the U.S. has long held a leading position in freight rail and urban transportation, while China has already become a global powerhouse in high-speed rail. He believes that the two countries have the potential to deepen cooperation in the field of railway transportation. Huang Yong'an also boasted that the U.S., as a longtime leader in freight rail and urban transportation, can still offer China a wealth of experience. Guan Jiasen, vice president of China Railway Construction Corporation Limited, said that their company has extensive cooperation with American companies in terms of equipment. He said, "We look forward to exploring more opportunities for cooperation in markets where American companies have strong influence, such as Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe." According to a report by the South China Morning Post, some industry representatives mentioned that, back in the day, American railway track-laying and manufacturing companies provided equipment for China's railway projects, covering both domestic and overseas projects, including urban rail transit systems like subways and conventional railway projects. Cui Yao, president of Westinghouse Brake China, said that over the past 20 years, the company's revenue has grown from almost zero to an average of $500 million per year, with $300 million of that coming from China. $200 million in sales from the Chinese market comes from products made in China and exported to overseas markets. He said this was a huge success. During the event, a representative from another American company said that their business had not been affected by Trump's tariffs because products supplied to Chinese projects in third countries were not subject to U.S.-China tariff restrictions. This representative also said that their supply to local Chinese projects had not been interrupted either, which was thanks to the company's high level of adaptability. This includes establishing multiple joint ventures with Chinese companies. Afterwards, the same American company representative pointed out that Chinese railway equipment manufacturers might find some opportunities in the U.S. subway market, but in the railway sector, there is almost no room for entry, because this field will be strictly dominated by American local companies. However, while American diplomats are bragging and American companies are refusing to let Chinese companies enter the U.S. market, what about America's only high-speed rail project? It's in trouble. As a notorious problem in the field of American infrastructure, the history of the California high-speed rail project can be traced back to 2008. After multiple delays and cost reductions, now only about 275 kilometers of the route remain. But just the cost for this section alone has reached $35 billion, exceeding the project's original total budget, and there is still a $7 billion funding gap. Trump is dissatisfied with the California high-speed rail project. It's been a long time. In February, the U.S. Department of Transportation launched a compliance review of the California high-speed rail project's funding. By June, the report showed the project had issues like missing deadlines, insufficient budget, and questionable passenger flow forecasts. On July 16, U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg announced the decision to withdraw $4 billion in project funding. On the same day, Trump said on social media he was saving American citizens from funding California's disastrous project. In this so-called high-speed rail to nowhere, he claimed that Secretary Buttigieg would not spend another cent of federal funds on this deep scam. On the same day, what about California Governor Newsom? He issued a statement in response, saying that the Trump administration's decision was illegal and vowed to fight back. He even brought up China, claiming that what Trump was doing was handing the future over to China, and said that California would not let him succeed. The report said that although the California government repeatedly played the China card, the dispute between Newsom and Trump over the California high-speed rail project is related to the struggle between the two major parties in the U.S. The report stated that Trump's termination of federal funding marks the latest confrontation between the Republican president and the Democratic governor, who is widely seen as a front-runner for the Democratic nomination in the 2028 presidential election. On July 17, the California High-Speed Rail Authority filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, challenging Trump's decision. They claimed that Trump's move was arbitrary and an abuse of power. The agency also stated that the U.S. government's investment in high-speed rail is insignificant compared to other countries and is especially dwarfed by China. The California High-Speed Rail Authority said that China has invested as much as $1.4 trillion, building nearly 2 million miles of high-speed rail network. According to data from China State Railway Group, China's high-speed rail operating mileage has reached 48,000 kilometers, accounting for more than 70% of the world's total high-speed rail mileage, and covers 90% of cities with populations over 500,000. To sum it up, first, regarding China-US railway cooperation, there's still room in equipment manufacturing. However, American suppliers are just one of many for Chinese railway construction companies. As for the claim the U.S. can outperform China in freight transport, that's honestly a bit of a joke. Looking at the numbers, in 2024, China's total railway freight volume reached 5.175 billion tons, a 2.8% year-on-year increase. In comparison, the estimated total railway freight volume in the U.S. for 2023 was about 2 billion tons. American politicians know they can't compete with China's high-speed rail and passenger transport, so they claim to teach China how to do railway freight better. Basically, whenever they talk cooperation, they act high and mighty. But in reality, China's railway freight, especially cross-border freight, leads the world in efficiency and usage. American politicians are living in a dream. Second, failure of California's high-speed rail project highlights inefficiency of American system. A fragmented decision-making system, with federal and local governments evolving into a patchwork of merchant-like policies with no continuity. How can you do long-term infrastructure investment like that? On top of that, the two-party struggle has caused deep divisions. For example, 18 Republican members from California wrote a letter to the federal government questioning the feasibility of the California high-speed rail project, which contrasted with Democratic Governor Newsom's defense of the project. This party-based logic has overridden professional judgment. This has actually caused American rail projects to fall into a vicious cycle where every time construction starts, it immediately sparks controversy. Thirdly, while the U.S. is still debating a high-speed rail line that's been in the works for 17 years, China's high-speed rail is already about to enter a new era of 400 km/h speeds. The CR450 trainset has successfully achieved operation at 450 km/h, raising the global standard for high-speed rail technology to a whole new level. But when it comes to Western politicians who are still dreaming, it's not just the Americans. Listening to what European political figures have to say can also leave you speechless. This Tuesday, the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting kicked off in Durban, South Africa. On Friday, the G7 finance ministers also took the opportunity to hold a separate meeting. At the press conference afterwards, German Vice-Chancellor and Finance Minister Christian Lindner loudly declared that the G7 would resolutely suppress China's economic influence. They unanimously agreed to collectively step up efforts to address the so-called issue of overcapacity. According to Bloomberg, Lindner specifically pointed out the problem of Europe's dependence on the automotive industry, which is crucial for Germany's export-oriented economy. He then arrogantly claimed that there is already a consensus within the G7. We will take the lead and study how to take stronger action against those junk products. American media said that the so-called junk products he referred to are actually Chinese products, which are becoming increasingly common in Europe. Besides calling for more economic resilience, Lindner also mentioned that the G7, this Western alliance, is facing even broader strategic anxieties. They are worried that the G7's influence in the global south is gradually weakening, while China and Russia are continuously deepening their partnerships in regions like Africa. In response to similar remarks from the European side, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wei Jiaquan had already. He noted these remarks disregard facts, full of prejudice and double standards. China is strongly dissatisfied and firmly opposes this. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized Chinese industry relies on continuous technological innovation, a complete industrial and supply chain, robust market competition, and abundant human resources. It's based on real capabilities, not subsidies or overcapacity. At its core, these concerns stem from worries about their own competitiveness and market share. They use this as an excuse for protectionist measures, but their anxiety is excessive, not production capacity. Chinese netizens commented German politicians are getting worse. European citizens, especially the younger generation, welcome Chinese junk products as affordable and good quality. This shows these European politicians are out of touch.